We're not right. All right, guys, welcome to this week's Plots and Pots. As you can see, this humble man behind me, that's the hubby. So on this week, before I start talking about Pazuzu, we are going to work on building this flower bed. And what are we calling it? The greenhouse flower bed? Yep, so that's what we're going to call it, the greenhouse flower bed. So we are going to dig this out, which shouldn't be too bad because it had black mulch on it for a couple of seasons, and we're gonna edge it, dig it out. Probably won't have to dig out that much, and then plant a Boulevard Cypress. I think some places call it a soft serve cypress. That's a tongue twister. Dimensions, I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 wide, and maybe, remember how tall that sucker got? The cypress. It's like 8 to 10 wide and maybe 10 to 15 tall. Yeah, so it's a focal shrub, tree, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, so that's what we're doing today. I'll do a quick close-up on the cypress, and then we're just gonna get into it and cue the voiceover.
All right, guys, like I said in the beginning, this is the voiceover. So just want to thank you guys for joining us this week at Plots and Pots, of course, where we dig up the dirt, all kinds of dirt. Today we're going to talk about a piece of ground in North Carolina that stayed untouched for 5 years. Not because anyone meant for it to, but because everyone who noticed something was wrong got told in one way or another to basically, I was going to say go fuck off, but basically go look elsewhere. So a little warning for this video, I will be covering death of humans and briefly of animals. So if this is not your cup of tea like last week, please feel free to skip this one and we will see you next week. All right, guys, so let's get started. We are going to be in Clemmons, North Carolina, which is not far from Winston-Salem, okay? It's a quiet street called Nob Hill Drive, the kind of neighborhood where by every account, nothing much happened. It wasn't until people started noticing the house at 2749. The windows were blacked out, the yard was closed off behind a fence, and on the outside of the house, if you look closely, there were things that should have stopped anyone walking past. A cross hung upside down, a sticker on the door that read, "Evil will triumph." Neighbors had rumors, and nobody had answers. The man living there had been born John Alexander Lawson in San Francisco in December of 1978. His family moved back to North Carolina when he was 2, and for years, by his mother's own account, he was just a normal kid. But that's not the whole picture. According to the documentary, The Devil You Know, John was relentlessly tormented at school, and he had a very different childhood than the one that his mother remembers. Things changed, she says, after she remarried, and the family, along with his new stepfather, moved into the house on Nob Hill Drive. I am going to keep calling him by that name for now, John, just because that's who he was when everything that matters to the story actually started. But here's the thing. The warning signs on this house didn't start with murders. They started years earlier, and almost nobody at the time knew what to do with them. A woman named Bianca Heath lived with John for about a month back in 2005, 4 years before either of the killings happened. She later said that during that month, he told her there were human bones buried in his backyard. She didn't believe him. Why should she? It sounded like something someone would say to seem dangerous, not exactly the confession of a lifetime, So that's the house. Now here's what happened inside of it.
Little side note, puppy does all the digging. So I've got 2 pots, and I've got some coleus that I have not planted up. they've just been sitting. So maybe I'll do that while he does that.
In July 2009, a man named Joshua Wetzler just disappeared. He'd been known to vanish for stretches of time before, so his former girlfriend, Stacy Carter, who is also the mother of his child, she wasn't too surprised. She said that he would go quiet for a while and then, he would all of a sudden turn up. So at first, him being gone really wasn't necessarily alarming to her. Arrest warrants would later allege that John killed Wetzler that July, and that his girlfriend, John's girlfriend, Amy Birch, helped him bury the body in the backyard. 3 months later, in October of 2009, a second man, Tommy Dean Welch, was at the Nob Hill Drive house. Okay, by one account, Welch had walked home briefly and told the people that he was with that he'll be right back, but he never came back. John's mother, Cynthia, who lived in the home, would later describe hearing gunshots that night, a scene she said that echoed something she had already witnessed once before, months earlier. So what you're saying is you knew that there was a possibility that your own son killed somebody and you didn't say a damn thing. Come on, Cynthia. Okay, warrants allege that it was Birch, the girlfriend, who shot and killed Welch that night, with John helping bury his body afterwards. Welch's family members, they remembered that night specifically because they had plans. His then partner, Carrie Price, I believe, later described it simply as like he hugged them goodbye. He promised to be back soon. They were going to have, I think they had like a movie and pizza night planned for once the kids went down. It was basically an ordinary night, okay? 2 men, 2 burials, same backyard, both within the same few months of 2009. At this point, John and Amber had started telling people that they were married, even writing on Facebook that they got married in like November 1st of 2009, right in the middle of the killing stretch, I'm going to call it. They weren't legally married, but it's worth noting, whatever this house was, it wasn't hiding. It was posting about itself online while 2 bodies sat in the yard behind it. And then nothing happened for 5 years. This is the part of the story most tellings, like most stories skip past on their way to the discovery, but this is the part that actually matters. Well, to me it does, because it's the truth. Almost nobody had to wait 5 years to learn something was wrong at that house. They didn't have to wait. Several people already knew in small pieces here and there and said something. It just didn't add up to anything. Not in time, anyway. In February of 2010, 7 months after Wetzler disappeared, his ex-girlfriend, Stacy, contacted police. She had heard from her friend that John had killed him. She made a report, and by her own account, she later learned she wasn't even the first person to raise the alarm, and that police had already been told, and she was never notified. An investigation did a follow-up though. A deputy actually went to the house, walked through the basement and the backyard with John himself, and asked him directly if he had shot someone. Nothing solid turned up that day. There were rumors about chlorine, and there was a pool in the backyard, so that explained itself. But there were rumors about cat litter. But the household had roughly 15 cats. I mean, let's just say it wasn't the most sanitary house. Okay? Every thread investigators pulled on led back to an ordinary explanation. Over the next several months, more anonymous tips trickled in, but as in one investigator later put it, the stories kept changing shape every time somebody told them. It's a frustrating kind of near miss. The tip was real, the follow-up happened, and it wasn't enough to see through what was actually going on. Around the same time period, a friend of Amber Birch's visited the house and later described what she saw on the walls. So she said she saw satanic writings on the wall, dishes crusted over and left for so long that the insects had gotten into them, and John's behavior itself was erratic and what she called unsettling. She says she tried not to step in anything on her way through. That wasn't secondhand rumor. This was someone standing inside that house years before the backyard was ever searched, describing exactly the kind of place true crime documentaries would later show the world. That same year, court records show John choked his mother badly enough that the officers tried to charge him. She declined to press charges, but she told them she was afraid of them. It's a detail that's easy to read past, but it shouldn't be. It wasn't a rumor or a whisper down the street. This was documented, on the record incident of violence in that house in 2010, 4 years before anyone found out what was buried in that backyard. In June of 2010, 4 months after that tip, a man named Joseph Chandler was shot dead at Donahaw Park. I do apologize if I'm saying that wrong, but the park wasn't far from Clemmons. He was the third man connected to that circle to disappear or to turn up dead within about a year. Okay, a separate man was charged with the actual killing, but John was charged as an accessory for letting that guy stay at his house after the killing. He pled guilty to that charge in 2012 and served less than a year. A freaking year. So by 2012, 2 years before the backyard was ever searched, John had already been convicted of a crime connected to a body found near his home. He had already been accused on the record of violence against his own mother. A tip naming him in a man's disappearance had already been filed with the police 2 years earlier. It's also around this time that John legally changed his name from John Alexander Lawson to Pazuzu Algarad. I'm probably butchering that last name, but we're just going to call him Pazuzu because that's the name I know. Now, Pazuzu is an ancient Assyrian demon that most of us, like myself, know from The Exorcist. It's one of my all-time favorite horror movies. But John's affidavit cited religious beliefs, but gave no further detail. He would go on to tell psychiatrists that he practiced what he called a Sumerian religion, one that involved regular ritual sacrifice of small animals in the home. Okay. Court documents described it as a regular occurrence in the house, not a rumor. It was documented like everything else. So just let that sink in for a second. A year later, in 2011, Amber Birch was convicted of assaulting John's mother as well. 2 separate assault cases, 2 years apart, both involving the same household, both a matter of public record well before 2014. None of it on its own proved what was buried 20 feet from the back door, but taken together, it's a pattern that existed in the public record for years, pieces that never got assembled into the picture that they were actually forming. It's part of the story that's the hardest to sit with. Not that something terrible happened, that the evidence of it was never really hidden, it just wasn't looked at. For 5 years, it was literally there staring them and slapping them in the face. So what finally changed? Okay. In late September of 2014, a new lead came in. This time pointing investigators to a woman named Dixie Ross. And unlike the pieces that had trickled in over the previous 4 years, this one didn't come apart under questioning. An investigator later described it simply, all the information started coming in all at once, and this time it actually fit together with what they had already gathered from years of scattered tips and the earlier search warrant. It wasn't one dramatic break, it was an old information finally lining up with new information at the same time for the first time. Hopefully that makes sense. By 2014, the county had also separately flagged the house itself. Okay, not for the murders, but for the condition it was in. Housing officials declared it unfit for human habitation. Investigators who went in described trash piled so deep in places they could not walk through certain rooms. One wall carried a written warning that every word you read there took another second off your life. Guys, it's not what you were reading on the walls. It was you walking through excrement and the smell of urine in that house, and how badly the odors and the dust would be permeating, and just breathing it in. Oh, nasty. Okay, that's what's taking time off your life, not reading the stupid words on the wall. Anyway, on October 5th of 2014, investigators executed a search warrant at the property. In the backyard in shallow graves, they found the skeletal remains of 2 people. You want to take a guess at who they were? Yep, you're right. Pazuzu, the name he had been going by for over a decade at this point, was then 35, and his girlfriend Amber was 24. They were both arrested and each charged with 1 count of murder and 1 count of accessory after the fact. A third woman, I'm going to pop up a picture of all 3. Her name was Crystal. She was also connected to the household, and she was charged with helping bury one of the 2 men. I don't know which one, but it really doesn't matter. The remains were identified as Joshua Wetzler and Tommy Dean Welch. Autopsies confirmed both men had been shot in the head. Yeah. Pazuzu never stood trial. Go figure. In October of 2015, just over a year after his arrest, he committed suicide. How convenient. It was in October of 2015, just a year after his arrest, he committed suicide in Central Prison. His mother, Cynthia James, kept his cremated remains in an urn in her living room. I remember seeing something about he was under a protective order when he was in prison. And even the press conference that they had when he died of this apparent suicide happened, they were very hush-hush, and it was very much, we just don't have that information right now, or I'm not at liberty to discuss that type of bullshit, right? Okay. Amber Birch, the girlfriend, she pleaded guilty in 2017, second-degree murder, armed robbery, and accessory after the fact murder. Okay. Prosecutors say that she was the one that killed Tommy Dean Welch, the second man, and that she helped bury Joshua Wetzler, who was the first victim. Crystal Matlock pleaded guilty the same year to accessory after the fact for helping bury one of the men. She was released from prison in 2018, but she was convicted again in 2020 on unrelated charges, so who knows what happened there. In April of 2015, the house on Nob Hill was torn down. As the walls came apart, the graffiti and the writing that had been covered for years, some of it since before the murders, was finally exposed to daylight one last time in front of the neighbors who wondered about the house for so long. By most accounts, people in Clemmons were relieved to see it go. If you watch the documentary that I'm about to talk about, you can see the neighbors sitting outside in their little lawn chairs. It's almost like they're having a little block party watching that house being demolished. If it was me, I wouldn't be having food out there with all that dust and debris flying around because, that's just unsanitary. Okay, so the documentary series on the case, it's on Viceland. I think they just call it Vice, but it's called The Devil You Know. It went further than most coverage did, looking less at Pazuzu himself and more at the people around him. And their point of view was that it was the mixture of how untreated mental illness and the community that basically stopped paying attention let this go on for as long as it did. Okay, it's pretty interesting to watch. I believe it's 4 episodes. Let's see. So with that, we've got all of that covered. The Cypress is in. Well, it's going in. It's not actually in right now. But the Cypress is in. The echinacea, I planted that. Rudbeckia, I did sprinkle some zinnia seeds in there as well. We got the soil all tamped down. It's watered in. It's not mulched yet. We'll probably do that probably this weekend. But anyway, from here it looks like it's just a settled little corner of the yard. If you walk past it, you wouldn't know which of these plants had been there for a while, which, just went in. They all look like they belong. I hope they look like they belong. But anyway, that's sort of the trap of this whole story. A yard that looks settled doesn't mean nothing's happening underneath, and a report that gets filed doesn't mean anything happens next, not on its own anyway. Stacy Carter made that call in February of 2010. She told police what she suspected, and she found out later that she wasn't even the first person who had said something. And still, it took 4 more years, another death, and a housing inspection that had nothing to do with the murder before anyone actually broke the ground on that backyard. I swear, it really does make you wonder about our processes. Anyway, the tip wasn't ignored because nobody heard it. It was ignored because nothing ever forced anyone to act on it until eventually something did. That's the part of the story worth sitting with longer than the discovery itself. The information was there. It just took far too long for anyone to dig into it. So here we go. New ground planted today. Old ground that took 5 years to finally get turned up. Not every kind of digging happens when it should, but eventually this one did. If you want to go deeper into this one, Vice, like I said earlier, put on a documentary series a few years back called The Devil You Know. It spends way more time than we or I could hear on the people around Pazuzu, and it's worth a watch if this case is interesting to you. It has secondhand accounts with people that knew him before he became Pazuzu and before he really went crazy, and it discusses other things that he did. Like, he was just he's an interesting one, I'll say that. But yeah, if you enjoy this, I hope to see you back next week. But this is Plots and Pots. Stay curious and stay dirty, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye guys.